So, can satellites become more than just eyes in the sky? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to be sitting down with the CEO of a company called NOVI. That's spelled N-O-V-I. And I want to hear more about how this team is rewriting the rules of Earth observation by embedding edge computing directly into space. So instead of sending mountains of raw data back to Earth, NOVI now processes it onboard in their satellites, turning terabytes into actionable insights before they even get to touch the ground. So Michael is going to share how this bold shift could make high-quality space data more affordable and usable for everyone. And what does that mean? And how will it unlock fresh ideas and even help new industries emerge along the way? These are just a few of the things we're going to explore today as we look up to the sky, to space, the final frontier. And on that note, let me introduce you to today's guest. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Certainly, Neil. It's a pleasure to be on here with you. I was looking forward to talking to you. Michael Bartholomeusz. I started out my career, Neil, in the aerospace industry. I actually worked on NASA's super lightweight tank program that ultimately sent Senator John Glenn into space second time around. So that was a great experience. And since then, I really migrated into the commercial sector, worked across a very broad array of industries: semiconductor, data storage, advanced materials. And my tradecraft was really commercializing technologies and transactions, corporate transactions, and really about 2 to 3 decades of enterprise management. And in last year, I decided to join NOVI. I had known one of the founders since 2008, and NOVI is doing some, is really engaged in some frontier activities in space, and I was delighted and privileged to be a part of the team.
Wow, what a great origin story there. I'm curious, how did the worlds of tech and space and satellites, how did all that stuff collide for you? Was it, I suspect it wasn't something you dreamt of being since a small boy. Maybe it was a mixture of things, but what lit the spark in you and put you on this path?
I think it was just curiosity, Neil. I've always been extremely curious about the world we live in and technologies, and it's probably a part of my own personal genesis. I grew up on 3 continents, so it's, working in a myriad of fields, finding common threads, commonalities, seeing how seemingly disparate fields inform each other and can promote traction, or things that were extremely exciting and interesting to me. So that's really why I pursued a fairly diverse career path. I fundamentally just sated my desire, my curiosity desire.
Brilliant. And for listeners who might be hearing about NOVI for the very first time, could you tell me a little bit more about how satellites work differently from traditional Earth observation systems? Because it'll be an area that people will know about roughly, but I'd love to dig a little bit deeper on that and demystify that.
Certainly. So maybe we start with, how Earth observation systems work today. And I'm specifically talking about commercial Earth observation. So, today there's a myriad of constellations up there with a variety of different image sensors. Some have, RGB, some have hyperspectral, just different image sensors, constellations, constantly collecting data on the world, imaging the world, and then sending those terabytes, petabytes of data down to Earth for analysis on Earth. So that's typically how the chain of custody works today. Satellites with eyes collect information, send this information down to Earth, and then the information gets processed into insights and intelligence. So that's the current conventional model, and it has a couple of handicaps. The first handicap is just this overwhelming amount of raw data that's sent down to Earth, which is extremely expensive to do. And then it really has to be crunched and processed on Earth to develop the insights that people care about. Most people don't care about raw data. They care about the resulting insights and intelligence. So what NOVI is doing is actually taking that compute analysis layer from Earth onto the satellites. The other thing that we're doing is we're putting multiple sensors on each of our satellites, because if you're really collecting data from different satellites at different times and different locations, that data fusion is also a very burdensome type activity. So by taking the compute layer on board, putting multiple sensors, we're really simplifying the process. It's a collect, analyze, discard model. And then instead of sending terabytes of data to Earth, you're sending bits and bytes, small data packets of insights and intelligence. And so this dramatically flips the cost value proposition for Earth observation data and should liberate a real proliferation of use cases.
Wow. So many companies gather massive amounts of satellite data, then send it back to Earth for processing. So, Novi, you chose to push the computing power into orbit instead. Was it all about cost, or was there any other big reasons for doing that?
I think, well, there's two primary reasons: costs and latency.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at Department of Defense or safety critical or emergency service type applications, current chain of custody, satellite images something, maybe it tips and cues another satellite. All the data is sent to the Earth. Then it has to be analyzed, and then it has to be sent to whoever needs to interdict or act on that data. However, if you can collect the data, analyze it with inference algorithms, and then send the insights to the interdicting asset, it's a lot faster. You can take a process that takes hours and literally shrink it to minutes and seconds. So in safety critical defense applications, that is extremely, extremely desirable. So we're really solving both the cost and latency issues that matter to different constituents.
So I was reading before you came on the podcast today that you described Novi's approach as helping to democratize Earth observation. So in practical terms, who stands to benefit most from faster, cheaper, and ultimately more localized space-based analytics?
Essentially everyone, right?
Yeah.
So there's two ways. Let me use an example, Neil. I mean, you and I will remember the era of the flip phone, right? We had flip phones and things like that, right? In 2005, 2006, right? The first thing was for phones to become ubiquitous, used by people around the globe, the price had to go down. And that's sort of Moore's law, right? The price went down. That was sort of element one. Then in 2007, Apple launches the iPhone and other smartphones come along. And once you put compute onto the phone, you resulted in this huge proliferation of applications and use cases. So we're really transporting that into space. Ultimately, a satellite with multiple sensors is very much like a mobile phone. Mobile phones have cameras and accelerometers and such. So you basically put a sensor suite in space. You put intelligence on board that sensor suite, you open access up to a very broad constituency of users, and use cases and applications should proliferate. So we see it as very analogous, and that's really the democratization of data. Now, there's a nuance there. Today's operators operate closed access systems where they really curate the data process, and there's a lot of hair around data ownership. Purchasing data doesn't necessarily mean you own the data and can freely engage in commerce with the data. So beyond cost, there are these hints of closed access platforms and data ownership, which are very, very constricting to the democratization and to the free flow of Earth observation data. So in addition to sort of the cost, the multi-sensor, the latency, Novi really believes the business models have to fundamentally shift. You need to go to open access platforms where users who generate data have ownership rights over that data to do with as they see fit. They can resell the data, they can monetize it, they can exploit it. So it's really this combination of cost, open access, and data ownership that we believe will democratize Earth observation data and is needed in the industry.
And I know you've already partnered with the US Department of Defense and missions planned with the Air Force and Missile Defense Agency. I'm not sure how much you're going to be able to tell me about that, but how have these collaborations influenced Novi's technology and ultimately that commercial roadmap too?
Yep. So we are actually already managing active missions. So, with our satellite for the Air Force is already operating in space on mission. And for the Missile Defense Agency, we have hardware on the International Space Station also operating in mission. So Novi has actually, we've gone through those growing pains of building the hardware, building the satellites and launching them and managing the missions for the DoD. What Novi was doing for the DoD was really, as we've discussed, putting edge compute onto the assets in space, because as we've discussed, latency matters in defense. And really, we were laser focused on those missions. But what we recognized, we thought deeply about the Earth observation space, and what we recognized is that by putting that compute layer in space, moving it to the space edge, the implication on economics could have a profound impact on commercial space. And that's when we really decided last year to go from our DoD focus into really a dual use business model where we now take everything we've learned and developed for the benefit of national security and extend that benefit into commercial space.
And this world of space-based edge computing sounds incredibly exciting. And just thinking out loud, it could open the door for new applications in industries far and wide, from agriculture and forestry to mining. But are you able to share any real-world examples of how your analytics in orbit are already beginning to make a difference? Is there anything you can share there?
I will be able to share that in about 9 months, because our current assets in space are for the Department of Defense, but our own constellation, our dual-use constellation, is manifest to launch on transporters 16 and 17 early next year. So that is when our constellation will go live. We start putting up the satellites and proliferating, and at that point, I will be able to talk about the use cases that we're onboarding. We are certainly currently working with customers, really early adopters who are working in all of the industries that you just stated, precision agriculture and mining and infrastructure and logistics. So we're starting the process of onboarding those customers. We've got a flight simulator. We've really got an emulator environment where these early customers can work on their inference algorithms ready to upload when we go live early next year. One of the things that you brought up, Neil, that I think is particularly interesting to me is the use cases you talked about, they exist today.
Yeah.
And it's the same sort of the usual suspects keep being brought up over and over and over again. And I think there's a general sentiment in the industry. Why aren't there more use cases? Or why aren't people in agriculture and mining using more Earth observation data? And I think it's actually quite simple. Let's address in the existing industries, why aren't more people using it? Cost. Clearly, it's just too expensive. So Earth observation data today is very much the purview of large enterprises and governments, right? It's why most companies who tried commercial space went running back to defense, because those are the folks who can afford to spend on it. So if you want precision ag and mine and transportation, logistics, insurance that base to expand, you got to drive the cost down. The other element is when you drive the cost down, you will start to see use cases that we haven't really contemplated today or aren't prevalent today. One of the interesting ones that I've been having discussions about is the gamification of space data. When you can look at the world dynamically and things are changing and you can get information down to Earth fast, you can imagine an environment that's analogous to Pokemon in space. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what these use cases are going to be, but if you have the platform, then you liberate the use cases.
Well, I'm going to set my calendar. We're going to synchronize watches for March 2026. You've left me with a big teaser, so we need to get you back on there. And I'm curious, when we're talking about vast quantities of data and trying to uncover insights, AI and machine learning, that's where it works best, of course. Is anything around AI and machine learning that excites you there as well?
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, when we talk about what kind of a company we are, we're not a satellite company. We build satellites. We understand software, but we're not a software and analytics company. What we are is an infrastructure company. We are setting up this platform, and you're right. The models up there are AI type models, inference models, because to gain insights, you look at vast amounts of data, you generate the insights, and then you transmit them. So, to a large degree, that's what Novi is. We are developing the open access AI infrastructure layer, AI infrastructure and compute layer in space. And I think Yeah, I mean, AI is phenomenal for that, right? When you actually want to develop very, very quickly distill huge amounts of data down bits and bytes of intelligence. And that's where really AI, machine learning, deep learning, all of these, all of these disciplines come into play and are very effective. Now, we do some of that ourselves too, Neil. We do, if customers want us to create and develop those models, we have the ability to do that. But that's not our business. Our business is to open the platform to allow others to upload their models.
And with these big plans for a full commercial launch in 2026, I'm curious, what are the biggest technical or regulatory hurdles that you might still need to be tackling to scale this service globally? I would imagine there's a few challenges there.
Yeah, so it's interesting since we've gone through the school of hard knocks, building satellites and regulation and launching them and managing. We've sort of cut our teeth on that. As we go from a few satellites to tens of satellites and proliferate this constellation, I think there's really two long poles in the tent. I mean, the first one from just a practical deployment standpoint is getting a steady cadence of passage on launch, right? Making sure that we can book launch in a timely manner on SpaceX or other providers. So that's really a logistical challenge and can be a very significant challenge if you miss launch windows or can't procure launch windows. The other is just really the FCC licensing process, right? As our communications increase and we need to increase our communication breadth, we just constantly need to go through the FCC licensing process. So that's some of the the logistical and regulatory challenges we'll face.
And if we do dare to look further ahead, how do you see space-based edge computing further evolving over the next decade? I know that's almost impossible with the speed of change at the moment, but how do you see it further evolving, and what role do you see Novi playing in helping to shape the future of Earth observation? It's some big thinking we're looking at here, isn't it?
Yeah, I again just go back to the transition from from regular mobile phones to smartphones. In in 2005, most of the most forecasters predicted that the mobile phone market in 2015 would be a little bit north of $100 billion. I mean, there are wide ranges, but call it about $100 billion. Smartphones introduced in 2007, 2008, and the actual 2015 market was $300 billion. So I think when you move compute to the space layer, when you affect things like cost, latency, when business models shift and become more user-friendly, I think we will see a similar inflection in the Earth observation market. I think today there are very, very broad ranges of what the EO market will look like 2030, anywhere from 14 to 30 billion. I think it could easily be double that. But to be double that, you are going to need a seismic change like smartphones facilitated in the mobile phone market, and that's really putting intelligence on board satellites. And not intelligence as a feature, but intelligence as the core value proposition. Today, people look at edge processing as a feature, data fusion, and some of those things. It really needs to shift from a feature to the core where everything is being processed, analyzed, and distributed on board.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today and bring this topic to life. It's incredibly exciting, your work here. And I guess if there's something we can do for you in return now, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding, and even tech have been guests or listened to this podcast. So is there a person that you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, maybe a hot coffee or a cold beer? Who would it be and why? Because he or she might just get to hear this. Who are you going to go with?
I think there are two individuals, really, Peter Thiel and Trey Stevens, right there. They are principled, contrarian thinkers with deep conviction. And these are individuals who have been champions of bold, founder-led innovation and really unwavering advocates of national security. So that type of resonance experience and outlook would be something I would welcome to engage with.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to officially put that out into the universe. Let's see what we can manifest together. But before I let you go, for anyone listening that is also quite excited about this, want to be following the launch next year, seeing what you're doing there, maybe even want to get involved, what's the best starting point for everything?
I think it's just our website, Neil. It's novispace.ai. And yeah, we would, certainly you can learn more about what we're doing there, users who are interested in engaging with us either in the defense or commercial sector are more than welcome to reach out to us through our website.
Well, I, for one, have been incredibly excited just learning more about how you've become this pioneer in space-based edge computing infrastructure. And instead of gathering data on a satellite and sending it down for processing, you've developed this onboard edge computer and low-cost multi-center satellite that significantly reduce both the cost, complexity, and latency associated with the usage of space-based data. Incredibly cool. I'd love to see where this leads. And I have synchronized my calendar. We will be talking again in March next year, but thank you for sharing your story today.
Certainly, Neil. I've really enjoyed our time together, and thank you very much for having me on.
What an incredibly cool episode there. I mean, space-based edge computing, moving from prototype to orbit, the promise of faster, cheaper, and more open Earth intelligence feels closer than ever. But how might this new infrastructure change who gets to innovate with satellite data? And what unexpected applications will emerge once space becomes a programmable platform? I'd love to hear what you think on this. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already, just at Neil C. Hughes. I'm at Neil C. Hughes on just about every social channel, so drop me a message anywhere. But that's it for today. So thank you for joining me on a rocket ship to talk about Earth observation and embedding edge computing directly into space. Where do we follow this up? How do we follow this up? Where do we go from here? Well, I will be back tomorrow with another guest. Speak with you then. Bye for now.